Okay, we're officially streaming again, so we will try this again. I was on my first announcement when we had to temporarily adjourn. It was brought to my attention that we had a first and second motion to approve the minutes, but we did not vote. So we have our first and second. I would like to real quick back up and for the meeting minutes approval, I would like everyone in favor to.
But before we do that, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
I noticed Miss Jackson's not on, and I wondered, do we still have a quorum?
We do.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I waited until we had a quorum. We have a quorum, I think, plus one or two.
All right.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I did send out the same update to everyone, so hopefully she's able to rejoin unless something came up. But we do have a quorum. So could we all in favor of approving the August 2nd, 2023 meeting minutes, please unmute and say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so they are officially approved. And Shamara has joined us. Good to see. Also, for the purpose of the minutes, I'd like to note that Nicole Bryan from KDLA has joined us, and that is the only difference from the first attempt. On to the announcements, which I swear are brief. We have two openings. One is the division director, otherwise known as the state archivist position. That is open currently and can be applied for through the 25th of this month. We also have an archivist 2 position, a first for KDLA because this is specialized while not having supervisory responsibilities. This is in the electronic records branch and will serve as our new electronic records archivist, which has been vacant since last year. That is also open and will be open until the 20th of this month. So that will be all for announcements. The first item on the agenda is the version of the guidelines for managing electronic communications in Kentucky public agencies that passed the commission and got their approval. This is essentially the version that we all agreed upon with the social media section taken out. And that was done in order to pass it because there were some concerns brought up in the commission about what some of the guidance meant, including the very first line, and they wanted clarification about an agency's ability to delete comments that are posted publicly. One of the very next things we work on will be our guidelines for social media, which exists. It was authored by the working group, I believe in 2015 or so, and it needs a facelift anyway. We were going to work on it anyway, so we're going to hash all of that out along with the social media section of our guidelines. So they line up and agree, but I did want you to know that that one section has been omitted temporarily until we can make it make sense to both internally within our working group and to the members of the commission. Mark Manley and Graham Gray, you are both on the commission. Would you like to say anything about this at this time? I don't intend to hash it out because I'd like to do it in concert with the next social media guidelines document. But Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an accurate description of what transpired. Specifically, one of the concerns from the Attorney General's office was the concept of retention, exactly whether or not public comments need to be retained in light of the fact that for anyone who's been on social media, you might be aware that people don't say the nicest things. on social media. And so there was a question about the public value of public commentary and the belief that it's either an all or nothing game, because once you start picking and choosing which comments based on content, you're getting into a First Amendment sort of scenario. And so there was some concern about that. But given the fact that we are going to update the social media guidelines, it makes sense to just go on ahead and deal with all those issues at the same time so that we can come back to the commission with sort of our suggestion of sort of a comprehensive solution and kind of, for lack of a better term, kill two birds with one stone. So.
Yep, and I was fine to give up that section to have it passed because these the email guidance and everything else is intact, and including the rest of the other forms of communication. So it is available. It is on our webpage. We haven't systematically disseminated the record or the guidelines yet, but it is complete. And if anyone is interested, I'll send you the final. It's very much what you saw with that one section omitted in order to get approval. Is there any other commentary on this process? I know it might be news to some of you. Okay. I'd like to point out that Becca Haldmeyer has joined the meeting for the purpose of the minutes as a guest from KDLA. Given that there's no further discussion, I will move on to the guidelines for managing electronic communications in Kentucky public agencies, quick reference. And I will go ahead and share my screen for this one. PDF. One thing I noticed, it doesn't explicitly say a quick reference. We can fit that right there. But has everyone had a chance to give this draft a look? What are your impressions? Are there any comments about the content that made it, the content that you think could be added? I think my our electronic records analyst, Sarah Garrett, drafted this, and I think she did an amazing job with it. So I wanted to put it before you all and see what your impressions were, or if you think anything could be added.
I have,
Go ahead.
you beat me by a second, whoever was going to talk.
I have a lot of comments. I don't know if we want to spend the meeting going over my comments, but in general, I don't see the links to the guidelines, the full guidelines here. And I would rearrange some of the things. And it seems to me that a few more sentences could be added if we reduce the font on the headlines.
Okay. You are welcome. I mean, really, if we can get some good constructive criticism this meeting, please do go on it with all of your comments. I know Graham had some too.
I'll go ahead, let others.
in the first paragraph, it does mention social media posts as one of the types of electronic communications that should be considered, but there's not a section for that in the guidelines. And maybe that's something that will be added after we review those. But I noticed that it says emails, text messages, social media posts, and other electronic communications. And then the sections are email, text messages, voicemail, web meeting, but there is no social media section. And I guess we would need to add that later once we review the social media.
That's the plan. We're not going to omit it in the guidelines
Okay.
for that long. We're actually going to do that next. And in fact, I mean, it was already a priority, but this has bumped up the priority quite a bit. Because I do want that section back in there. I'll say records management wise, a lot of the questions from local agencies are in regards to social media posts that we field. So it's important. I'm in favor of leaving it in here, but if you think it creates confusion by not having a section for the time being in the guidelines, I'm open to altering how the sentence reads.
Yeah, I think either we should put a note saying that the social media guidelines are currently under review. Just because I think that first sentence creates an expectation that we will provide some information about social media in this document.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to the extent, you have the sort of the catch-all and other electronic communications after that. So, I mean, it doesn't specifically refer to social media posts, but it's still kind of puts people on notice that it's more than just emails and text messages, and maybe they can infer social media posts without us having to explicitly say it if we're not going to at this time follow up.
Yeah, just for the time being. I think, yeah, emails, text messages, and other electronic communications, that's fair.
Graham had some comments too, but I've got a comment. Graham, you can go first if you want to.
Okay, I have a couple. On the first sentence of email management, it says email messages or public records in Kentucky should be treated as such. I know the implication is that you're talking about state records, but that's not how it reads. It's just reading that every email message anyone in Kentucky sends is a public record. So I know that's not the intent, but I think that's a little misleading. I think maybe we need something like as indicated above, or pursuant to KRS 61.870 at sec, comma, email messages or something, to give some context so that people realize, because two people who have never been employed by state government are emailing each other doesn't make it a public record.
Yeah, or maybe just referring back to the definition, which is, well, what is it? Created, owned. I don't know. The definition that you have at the top, maybe just kind of
I
put
see
it
what you're
in
saying.
there.
It omits the created by. So yes, of course,
Yeah.
two guys using Gmail to email each other. Yeah, I know what you're saying. We can make it point back to that to indicate.
Okay. I think that would help. In that same paragraph at the very end of it, very minor point, but there's no period. It just says into which that message falls. So I know that's very minor, but it needs that. Then if you'll scroll on down to, I think it's a couple of sections further down. Keep going. I think it's under voicemail. Voicemail is kind of a similar concern about not pointing back. It says, they are often not managed as public records. Again, there's no clarification that you're talking about, public agency voicemail. It just seems to be just talking about voicemails in general. So I think there needs to be a point back there too.
Yeah, I think the intent was like they were taking the audience into consideration, and this would be sent, as part of work. But you're right. We should disambiguate that a little bit.
And I think that was all I had. about it.
Yeah, Graham addressed the same ones that I had with respect to maybe just referring back to the definition of public record when we refer to each type of document.
I would like to address the links to the guidelines and how we're going to refer to the full version of the guidelines. It seems to me there's some options for linking to parts of the guidelines, particularly ones that have diagrams and explanations that are not in this. But we need a statement to begin with that the full guidelines are available. I think that I also think that the reference to the schedules should be above the email management to show that all of this applies to the schedules.
Yeah, agreed. We can move this chunk just under the front matter.
Right.
Possibly. Yeah, we obviously need a link to the entire PDF of the guidelines that were approved. Whether to drop that in at the very front or the end, or
I would do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, maybe the first paragraph is fine, but add on to the last sentence, this is just intended to be a quick reference for more detailed guidelines. Please see, something to that effect.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And maybe
And-
just a word or two in this beginning overview would satisfy the reference that you just clarify that all the following discussion is about public records under KRS 171 and then 61, then that would be all you would need. Then you wouldn't have to make those other changes.
Okay.
So I had thought that in general, this shortened version of the guidelines was to be kind of eye-catching, or at least refer to things that were more eye-catching, like some of the diagrams and decision points spelled out in the. I also think that we need more examples of the different types of things, or reference to series. Under email management, they don't refer to any of the general the correspondence record series that are extensive in the guidelines, but not even mentioned here.
Yeah. Well,
So,
this is a first draft, which is more than we had. I'd like to point out.
oh yeah, absolutely,
The
absolutely.
guidance I provided was, let's make it a one sheet, at least for starters. Because I would like, yeah, it's a clickable PDF, but at the same time, if it were to be printed out, I'd like it to be like front and back, maybe. And that would allow for a little more. I don't want it to take on a life of its own and become the guidelines again. So there could be a happy medium.
Yeah, I agree completely. And right now it works out to 2 pages, which I think we should probably keep that length. That's why I suggested reducing the font to accommodate things that we add. But I didn't know if this was a particular prescribed font and presentation that's used on the web by KDLA or what?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
It's meant to be easy to read and, small blurby. What's lacking is definitely the link back to the main guidelines. It's a starting point for sure. And we could host some pages independently from the guidelines. We could sort of explode that PDF a little bit and put in the graphics. So when you click on it, it'll pull up just a page that's relevant. That's all very doable.
Yeah, one way or the other, either to have separate little pages or short diagrams and things, or refer back to the place in the guidelines. I don't know whether that loses people to be
Right.
put back into another document. Could be.
I think it could be useful to emphasize that regardless of medium, the content is what determines what you do with it. Because just looking at the teleconferencing again in higher ed, we have a lot of tools now for doing teleconferencing advising with students. Obviously, that's going to be very different than a meeting that would be subject to open records. So I think if we could work in, like, I guess I think this sheet is kind of a quick reminder that there are all these schedules and that you do need to think about, is this, like, looking at the other documents that you provided. I really liked the flow chart about, and the examples of, like, if I get an email from a vendor advertising something that is not, that I didn't ask for, I can just delete it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think if each section just had a reminder, it's not the medium, it's the content. And so then that would kind of refer them, this isn't going to answer all their questions. It's really just a memory aid to say, you should be looking at the schedule. All voicemails aren't the same. All teleconferencing chats are not the same. And you need to be looking. So.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. I was looking at the voicemail, the examples of things that could be captured, and most of those, actually, in my opinion, most people should be deleting those, but it kind of gives the impression that they should be keeping them.
I also think at the end, we should reference the state approved software list, provide a link to that, and mention that all of these types of communication use software that needs to come from an approved list.
Okay.
That could come at the end.
Well, this is also a document for local records as well as state records, and local records doesn't have to abide by KIT. So I think that's an important clarification here. You also mentioned wanting to add in a lot of references to record series, but this document is going to reflect both the local records general schedule and the state records general schedule. So there has to be a limit there of referencing whether we're going to include some. We have to include some from both. We can't just pick and choose state or local. We would need to include both or not include either.
Good point.
We're doing two versions of this, one for state, one for local.
I had a crazy thought, and I mean, it might be really off the wall, but what if, since this is going to be housed electronically, and then they have the choice of printing it out, what about, to save space, that hyperlinks? So when they go to print it out, the hyperlink will already print out the additional items like the flow charts and the other things that they could use as a reference tool. And then that way you're still referencing it, but then they still catching it if they print it out. So that way that they have it and it saves space with having to write everything or please refer to such and such. It may be legally you have to just do that. It was just a thought.
We're trying to do this at the local level at KCTCS to give, we've got faculty and then we've got staff that are working in administrative offices, HR or finance or whatever. And we've been struggling also with how to make it a quick readable thing. And then also have references for specific people. And we're landing a bit on like the one sheet or the double-sided one sheet with very general reminders like, anything can be a public record regardless of format, depending on what it contains. And then having, like you're saying, a separate sheet that for that, so there's a general one for everybody. And then there's one attached to it that's like for faculty and one attached to it for, administrators who serve on official boards, on the Board of Regents or whatever, and one for HR and one for finance and one for, people who hire student workers and stuff like that. So there may be some people who get a giant packet with the front sheet and then multiple attachments. But this one seems like it's meant to be just the front sheet. And so I think just emphasizing, the records regulations apply regardless of medium. And these are some examples of media that you may not think you have to keep, but depending on their content, you will need to refer to these before you delete them or however you handle them, you will need to refer to these schedules. So, this isn't going to be, it's really almost just a memory aid to say, hey, don't forget your text messages might be covered. So I think we need to decide more what we want it to be.
Yeah. We can also, this is a front and back or potentially depending on how it's printed. I don't see why, I agree we should definitely add more of what you're talking about. We could also just make the next page the flow chart, make the next page the sample filing. I do agree we should have, I'm thinking back to like, I don't know if it's eye-catching or not, but like textbooks and stuff, and they had like a little inserted image that could have the primary types of communication to get folks thinking like that could fit in here or something. And where I do want it to be short and concise and probably not include state and local. I think a state version and a local version is very doable. And we could have it linked separately, very explicitly mention state employees, local government employees. That would give us more room on the page to really hone in on what we need for that specific audience. And ultimately, if we put flowcharts and stuff within this document, it would be up to whoever printed it, because obviously that's front and back. It's like if they want the flowcharts, they can print those too, or just trying to think. It's already something for them to print it out and be like, this is useful. I need this. I'm going to keep this on my desk. But like, I'm trying to make it easy for them because I don't want to put a bunch of work on them in addition to taking the gumption to print this out. And, yeah, I wrote down a link to kits. Probably required. I think at least one link in the front matter pointing to the main guidelines that could just flow from this first paragraph. I believe Graham suggested that, and then maybe another one that even appears like a button down here for click on this for the guidelines to open up that PDF. All good thoughts so far. And again, we didn't have anything, so this is a great starting point. And I like the way it's set up. I truly do, and like how it's broken down and very concise, but with a little more context and instruction, like simple statements, like Jenny mentioned. I think this could look a lot better next time we meet. We'll jump in between meetings, and we have a while until our next meeting. It's not until January because of the election and then holidays. We will, take those ideas and put it into this. I haven't been editing live because it's a PDF, and I just want to get your general feedback. We can put all of those ideas to work and get another draft to you for our next meeting. But is there any other observations or comments on this for this meeting? Okay. Well, thank you. That's incredibly helpful, clearly, and we will be working on this in the next couple months. So I have we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is discuss electronic signature record keeping guidelines, which I can share that as well. So November 2011 is when it was done. We've discussed this some. I was wondering if I know we have made a couple changes. Were there any other comments on it, if anyone had a chance to review it in the meantime? Because I feel like this one could be figured out a little quicker than some of the others. If there's no new comments on it or any recommended changes, I'm comfortable with moving on. But did anyone have any comment for this meeting?
I think it would be beneficial to add the same type of disclaimer we had on the other to this, because some of the stuff we start discussing, different statutes and everything. And I mean, one of my favorite jokes is that if you get 5 lawyers in a room, you're going to hear 10 different opinions. So, I mean, some of the stuff I was reading, I was thinking, well, I don't know that I could say this is wrong or that it's right. Some of it was kind of borderline. So, but I'm fine with it being that way as long as we have a disclaimer, in that.
Like with the short guidelines, I think a statement on the end that refers to the official, the official approved software list is appropriate, because the signatures are in a lot of things, a lot of different kinds of software and messages.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
But the Secretary of State was, I thought, was going to come up with some comments. The office, Jeremy.
Anything new on that front, Jeremy?
Not on this front yet, because we'll talk about this next year. We've got a couple projects going on that are going to reference this. I don't know if anyone knows what an apostille is. It's basically a certification of a document going overseas, birth certificates, adoption papers, things like that. And we're actually going to be the first state to actually make that electronic. So we're actually tying that in with single certificates and electronic signatures on that front. So we will probably have a presentation for you guys next year on that, because that should go live by the end of this year.
Awesome. I look forward to that presentation for sure. Do you think that would change the context of this document, or would this merely be a part of that new process?
I don't think it would affect this document anyway, because all an FSD actually is typically it's something signed by the county clerk, and we are certifying the county clerk's signature officially before it goes overseas.
Yeah, as we determined the last time we talked about that, the laws haven't really changed, so it's more about formatting this, making it read better, updating some of the language. That's another thing we can work on before next meeting in the intervening months.
I thought we were also going to reduce the list of resources
Yeah.
at the very end. So the American Bar Association is a natural one. Something in the archives area is a natural one, but not the, I don't know, half dozen that we've got there.
Sounds good. I think, are there any other directional comments or anything? Because I think we have a lot that we can apply to this right now. Probably not live, but between, and we would post all the changes as suggestions. No, nothing will actually change in the document until it's agreed upon by the group. But that's another thing I can work on before the next meeting. Any other comments, though? Okay. Well, again, very helpful feedback and direction for that one. And I think we do have a lot to work on with this one. And some of the verbiage I know I would want to change, so I will add those as suggestions. So if there's no further discussion for this one, all that is left is a vote to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, do we hear a second?
Second.
All right. Please unmute if all in favor and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Doubtful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and then joining us again. This was incredibly helpful, and we hope to have some good drafts for you in the new year. I can't believe that is when we're meeting next. The next meeting will be January 3rd, if that works. And otherwise, we'll try and reschedule it. Hopefully everyone's available back from New Year's on the 3rd. So thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll see you in January.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.